Okay, yeah, I'm going to make another video. I made several of them earlier today, but the memory, my storage was full, and it's not assigning, moving it like normally it would be with an Android from the internal storage to an SD card. This being an Apple iPhone, it should automatically, either manually or automatically, be moved to the iCloud as a storage media file. Well, anyway, all kinds of technical difficulties and, just icons available to even click on it, and finding it just isn't there. So like I'm already having those kind of issues with software engineering. It's almost like a not funny live interrupt bypass thing. But anyway, yeah, so anyways, I was talking a little bit earlier about some factors of the Abraham Lincoln Night Vision, and I thought about the kernel and computer programming and language that way with HTML, and comparable to like what Hotmail would be as a node, and predominantly like Orion Performance Monitor with software and network operations, identifying a hotspot in software that way, called a hotspot, a node. What a node is in similarity in software is to like a hardware, a hub is to hardware, with the human factor of connectivity of switching and routing as compared to a node is. And the difference between like a hub is like it has the alternative to like switch and route like at an intersection at multiple directions of however the configured network and the configuration is for I'm assuming per design, per need, for who's all involved with the network itself, and configured to specific design that way. But anyway, yeah, so like I was thinking about that with the kernel, because it seems to be presenting an issue. What similarity would be, some thought of like measuring cycles per second and oscillation of frequency, and how bandwidth and spectrum is predominantly that. There's some idea of solid state of the bandwidth and spectrum. And the thing with this is that anything going beyond, measuring cycles per second and frequency is normally the thought of, waveform of special effects and processing in waveform that way. And I was thinking about how the squelch, the squelch is kind of like I was mentioning a little earlier in it, and it was never ever identified in any kind of way if it's, and I'm assuming I will know if I just like absolutely need to know, but somewhere in my mind it's almost like the redundant frequency, or the 8 ohms that's predominantly pretty much the mainstay of a constant of most cabinet speakers and PA systems, and virtually every speaker that I've truthfully ever known of, maxing out, with like stack amps, totaling 50,000 watts, all 8 ohm resistance that way. But as far as like redundant frequency goes, it just seems to be the 24 thing about the homeowners associated, the HOA, and GMAC of promissory nodes, and the IEEE of the International Electronic Engineering. And the thing with this is that it seems to be that my focus here recently, and where I'm like really at right now with the alphanumerics and linguistics and practical application of principle and compatibility and integration, analytical, all that stuff. Well, it's kind of like I'm on SSI right now. And it seemed to be that the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi is almost like a portrait and a landscape of a 90-degree of, what would be maybe just say a normal regular size 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, or a portrait, being like a vertical 8.5 by 11, with 11 inch going, from top to bottom, 8.5 from, left to right, side to side, and like a landscape would be, a 90-degree at that angle with the 11 from side to side. Or my thought about the wide thing about the 90-degree. In any case, so like it's kind of like think about that with the superimposium and the Diners Club symbolic representation with that circle with the center line. And the 90 degrees seems to be the real deal about what quadrants is, and terminology as far as like symbolic representation and analytical and integrating factors, or even the intersecting axes that way. And I was thinking about that, and HTTP:// because of the kernel, and my thought, if integrating, measuring cycles per second oscillation of frequency as compared to waveform, somewhere in my mind, if it's going to be the issue of like a HTTP:// and computer programming and language using like AJAX, is one of the languages with HTTP:// and that being the alphanumerics of 36 and chasing oil and the telepathic, the TP thing about it, and anyone that has anything to do with like what Washington is to like laundry, and the AJAX thing about what AJAX in pronunciation as compared to computer language, it's kind of like automatically the Washington direction with just pronunciation that way. But anyway, so seems like the programming and language goes right to it with television and the alphanumerics 130 the way of Washington and Washington D.C. the thing about it. And anyway, so but the squelch is kind of like, it reminded me like of a I haven't really thought of it anything other than it seemed to be like a null and void, like there, and it's known to be there, but actually having any reality of like accomplishing, noticing any productive anything about just a knob there. I never really, it's sort of like the thought of like tweaking, fine tuning. I don't think I even got that much out of it, like any radio that had a squelch, but I'm thinking about something about that, because I mean, if it's really some idea of like what a pool might mean in collections, as some idea, a thought, or not involving any type of forbearance or some type of guarantor that would present maybe a similarity of not necessarily even clearance and liquidation, but forbearance would give the similarity of like a non-taxable income based upon, I mean, if it has to be like a tax credit in a way of like forbearance as a student loan, or the similarities of non-taxable income and supplemental security of non-taxable income, and some thought about the International Space Station and supplemental security as like some symmetrical, asymmetrical thing of the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi, and getting like the 180 about the symmetrical, asymmetrical of like the acronym itself, being the ISS and the SSI. And it being the vertical thing about it, and like the equator, it seemed to be like the big deal about the 9 degree, and what the operator is in that way to HTTP, that the 0 about the 64 in American, and HTTP:// and all the alphanumerics I've been referring to. And I'm actually doing a couple more because I made several videos this morning. Somehow, I just got an Apple iPhone 13, and it wasn't allowing me to transfer the internal storage to an iCloud. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even really, after looking at it, it was showing that it has 128 gigabytes of internal storage, and in reality, I mean, it wasn't showing any moving the internal storage to the iCloud as a storage media file, and wouldn't allow me to like do anything in any of the normal icons that would be assigned for actually designating freeing up space and internal storage by moving it to like an iCloud. I mean, it just wasn't happening. So I had to erase like everything, just start over, and I made some like videos like in this white shirt like earlier this morning. Hopefully I'll be able to retrieve it and find it. But anyway, I thought I'd include this real quick because I was thinking about the squelch and some alphanumerics, ultimately the way it's spelled through like 91 in the future. And it's kind of like certain factors. You've probably heard it all throughout your own participating factor all the way through high school, certain parts of whether it's a 2-year junior college, community college, or a 4-year degree at a major university at more so likely at the minimum. Students probably throughout their education getting into the towards the degree, it seemed to be that some of the information is core curriculum, not necessarily core, but some information is provided. I mean, it's like what do I even need that for? And it's like many students would think in their own mind that they're not even going to use some of it, and that's true about quite a bit of it. But sometimes it's kind of like I'm thinking that if it's ultimately getting beyond, not having intent to go that direction, like I see that squelch, and some idea of like the memory of it maybe representing maybe something in my mind of the delta force or the 8 ohms or redundant frequency in a way. I'm thinking about looking at it, because the thing about the Abraham Lincoln night vision and all that about the shadow government or whatever the case may be, what Abraham Lincoln would only present. I mean, if the kernel in color code would represent maybe what a plantation is in color code of, predominantly, I don't like to call it slavery or really even black history, but, the thing with this is that as far as the black books of like the United States constitutional law and the Burning State of Texas statutes annotated and other factors of, like even, the commercials provided. Once again, I'm saying again because I'm having to make this video again. I've said it several times on my YouTube.com channel at WadeASV Pretty, but, hey, I like a Sprite new. And the colors of the Sprite, being like the pastel green. And it has two colors. And I think it's virtually an identical match of a pastel green and the green. And I'm not sure if it's considered a pastel. I'm thinking it probably so, but, matching the color of the book jurisprudence with the black back on it and all that connectivity, the one word of warehousing involving, Burning State of Texas statutes annotated the word repudiation or repudiation as far as like a jurisprudence with a black back. I mean, it's like the only word that I know of involving what seems to be the difference of like saying software of storage area network that way of warehousing with that one word jurisprudence with a black back and repudiation. And it seems to be the deal about the connectivity between saying software and the acronym whether the thought of a human capital is the only issue of whether if it's going to be the securities and annuities network or the storage area network and what that is going through a circuit in that way, all the way, and my thought of even the North American Free Trade Act, all the way back to the Cowboys and Indians thing about the, what a reservation is as compared to a plantation or some thought of political science and terminology of implementation and what aggregates is in that way, or, constitutional law having the right to assemble, the freedom of speech and freedom of press and all that stuff about, what I've mentioned before and that way. So it's kind of like, it seemed to be that the thought of the aggregates of the monetary domestic gross national product. And the gross national product is predominantly involved with like warehousing and storage area network in any case with like importing and exporting. And the front lines of the big front with that same software, international financial management, and all the connectivity, color code, and I mean just like one word as far as I know, like right now, warehousing would present the, storage area network as well as the gross national product that way. Normally of importing and exporting, or products manufactured and made and some idea of like the plain horizon as compared to what a pie chart would only be to business law and, going through like what corporate multinational corporations involved with importing and exporting is with the plain horizon that way of not limited to maritime law, but predominantly, the biggest shipments of maritime law. But yeah, so anyway, so like I was thinking about that because it seemed like that partition of language of the kernel. And I don't know if it's only based on maybe something that doesn't even normally even present itself as together, like maybe why a U.S. patent is not a copyright or necessarily even a trademark. I mean, if that's really the issue of like a squelch, my thought of like the power squared and the E equal MC squared and the exponential quotients of powers of multiplication, it seems to be, the thing about practical application and integration and compatibility and all that stuff about it. But likewise, in addition, with the squelch, it seemed to be maybe, what would be presented and used in a different way and manner of what attenuation might only mean to processing speed. And how true it is about measuring squelch. I'm not sure if it's even comparable to like nano units of like night vision. It's really what the thing, I might take the time to actually try and find out if the squelch is really involved with the redundant frequency or measured, what would be like of optical and vision that way of like nano luminous of night vision. I mean, nano is normally just like one of the smallest units of measurement, normally of electronics involving LED or, the thought of emitting a certain type of light. And I'm not sure if it's always going to be the thought of like infrared or infragreen, although the night vision is predominantly the pastel colors on the 13-band graphic equalizer, the only two. And I think JVC is the one. And my memory serves me correctly. I mean, I wasn't looking for any of this stuff. It's just like, looking at it and having it and not realizing anything about what I'm talking about now, but now I am. But I think it's GVC that had the 13-band graphic equalizer with the pastel green representing, in my mind somewhere in world history, the province, and the pastel green in world history and world class is the pastel green. My thought about even, the thought maybe the Garden of Eden thing beyond, the 9-hole golf course or the Pyre Square, dual credit thing about the 2 9-hole golf courses onto the the thing about the province and golf coursing, what that is, and is or is not, or whether it's a known or not known fact. I mean, so much of the stuff that I talk about, it's like so many people, like I myself, has had information for years and not even had a need or considered. I mean, even if it mattered, I mean, even knowing it, it's kind of like, you got to be kidding me. And seeing it in a whole different perspective, especially when like Alpha-American linguistics gets involved in proper English numerical composition and everything about it. It's like a whole different perception. And like I really like studying and getting into all that. But anyway, so like it seems to be that the squelch is presenting an issue. It's like a similarity, if not, the actual measurement in nano units that way of the squelch. Because I'm not sure if it's really involved with like the redundant frequency, or the thought of what night vision might only mean based upon maybe an American amplified issue of the the one word of amplification on the home theater. I think it's the largest. I don't think it's limited to, but I think it's only the acronym that distinguishes the difference of the amplification of 192. And it seems to be that the American Amplified, living by the American Amplified thing about the AA, is the 192. And that one word in the book of Thessalonians, the Transfiguration, in Alpha-American applied to that on the backside of the US $1, the Newark copies thing, equaling 12, and pretty much about the thought about the 12 is 12, and what that is to the 12 reserve banks, the 12 tribes of Israel, and then even 12 volt DC circuit, and the list goes on and on about stuff like that. And the Alpha-American, the numerical value of 12 itself being 87, or the thought of the absentee thing, the baby Ruth, and the true thing about the Alpha-American of 87, and quite a bit about the absentee in many ways that way. But yeah, so like I was thinking about that because I seen the squelch. I'm looking into that to see if there's if squelch is actually measuring cycles per second in oscillation, or a scale reference that way that would present maybe a nano unit, even smaller than a micro. I think it's called a microfarad or something like that. Anyway, in any case, yeah. So like I'm looking at all that because it seemed to be that all that with Abraham Lincoln studying in the dark of my thought of what would be considered, the International Financial Management hood ornament, the rectangle being the vertical thing about the Lincoln Continental. And Continental, think about that once again, all that good stuff about the International Financial Management, SAN software. And, well, anyway, it's kind of like I was wanting to get to the part about George W. Bush, okay? And, the transition between the William Jefferson, Clinton, and Al Gore, and the 1992 presidential inaugural ball with Chevy Chase. And the thing I was getting into a little bit earlier, it's already going on 17 minutes, getting close to 18 minutes now, but the additives, preservatives, and byproducts is normally like on the dry goods, like on virtually every dry good product, and I think certain other types of food that would be non-perishable. I'm not sure if it was like all, but some, and I'm not sure if it was only limited to just non-perishable in the way of like dry goods, or if that would include like anything else that was like canned and preserved that way. But anyway, yeah, so like when I noticed I didn't see that, it was already into the George W. Bush administration. And the thing about the 23, like George W., his middle initial, you see, the thing about available information in people's name is almost like Colin Powell involved, with like just his name alone, and the HTTP : // and, the thing about Austin Powers, Blue Bonnet, Imperial Eagle. And I can't believe it's better thing about the HTTP : and I can't believe it's better thing about the Blue Bonnet and the Imperial Butter thing about it. But yeah. So anyway, so it's like it gets through all that, and then George W. Bush, it seemed to be the transition between William Jefferson Clinton to George W. Bush that in my mind is introducing the thought of like the .gov shadow government of like night vision of Abraham Lincoln, because really, seriously, just because of the transition of like noticing that I wasn't seeing the three additives, preservatives, and byproducts that were normally on the food, and it seemed to be that diners clubs are going to be the big deal about having a right to assemble with their symbolic representation with a circle and a center, vertical center line in the center, and then 90 degree of center point, even center point energy, and NRG that way of like the International Electrical Electronic Engineering, and the Tower of Power about electro and electronics, and my thought of beyond, the thought of like Reliant, but anyway, yeah. So like my thing about it is that George W. Bush seemed to be, W being a 23 thing, and here's the thing about Dr. Pepper, okay, is that like it's pepper, okay, it's like black, okay. It's like night vision automatically, right? Because here's the thing, once again, Dr. Pepper is like the only carbonated drink that's celebrated and like an iconic, deal with the decade and the century of like the 23-year anniversary celebration with the 23 ingredients. I mean, it's like both 23, an anniversary celebration and the 23 ingredients. And the thing about 20 and 3 is like 20 is alphanumerically is like 107, and like the county road I live on, and the 3 is like, once again, the thing about like Paper Made and 56 is 10, and the 3 been alphanumerically THREE and 56 and all the stuff that I've been getting into about the alphanumeric, for like Paper Made being 56 is 10 and annotated, and the thing about Roe v. Wade and the spelling of Roe with the W, like I was suggesting, Roe v. Wade being on the news, not necessarily anything other than Roe, normally the perception of an abortion, but it's like, hey, you saw it on the news, and just the W with R-O-E and R-O-W is like makes a difference into the, hey, it's a miracle, it's on the news, and like it was already on the news anyway, and complete opposite thing about an abortion being an adoption. And what annotated is in all the color codes and in the law library of what annotated in my mind seems to involved with like even the color sprites, pastel greens, and between the province and the jurisprudence and the black back representing in my mind what annotation is or is not, or what participation is or is not. And the thing, what repudiation might even give the impression of jurisprudence involving warehousing, of the ultimate thing about storage area network. And the thing of it is that really in all that connectivity, I mean, I was like looking for quite a bit when studying, and looking for, a whole bunch of alphanumerics and linguistics and like where's it at and definition dictionary. I mean, a lot of time. I mean, like years and years and years, like not limited to what I'm talking about now for real. But in any case, so like when that one word repudiation and reputed got involved in my mind, hey, I like this writing it, and the pastel green of province of world class and world history, being the pastel green. And the book of jurisprudence and what that is in the law library as compared to codes annotated and all the color codes of codes annotated as compared to like jurisprudence with the black back, or the color code of the United States Supreme Court Southwest Court Reporter. And the reason why I think predominantly quite a bit about the Southwest Court Reporters, because that's the one I really looked in and focused on, predominantly just because of Southwestern Bell in the Houston area, then the code blue thing of Southwestern Bell telephone communications and network operations and everything about the blue, complete blue thing. Now it's like AT&T, the color code of like the 1040 EZ form, and Air Force One of the like President of the United States. But I've seen different things, and it seemed to be like going through the circuit when the color of the uniform was actually part of Air Force One, like the dark deep midnight blue thing about it in combination with the baby blue and white, the color, from like Southwestern Bell to like AT&T and, international like communications and network operations that way. Likewise, like a non-taxable income of color code of the 1040 EZ form, yet the acronym of the International Space Station or International Superstar and Supplemental Security and Superstar Intelligence and Intelligence Ops and all that stuff about it, and Pentagon Reserve Reverse and all that stuff. Well, anyway, so like I was looking at that non-taxable income in the way of like what supplemental security is that way, and think about the annuitized thing about non-taxable income as compared to what percentile might only be the humor or forbearance of a student loan, beyond the thought of like Mount Olives, and all that haloed video canvassing halo schematic ass on the toilet, or the thing question of the century of like fine arts and humanities is that invisible ink or glow in the dark toilet paper thing about it. Beyond the abstract satire, and a more informative presentation and a color-coordinated, more welcoming, presentable pastel color about, terminology that's like all major universities about, just like logic circuitry of like an anatomy and, proper digestion and like, good health and wealth and all that stuff about, brains about, the humor in terminology that way. But, I mean, it's at least so very much, it seemed to be predominantly the word relation between architecture and platform and compatibility. What would be the thought of whether the equator is only the issue of the belt line, or a degree level, have more brains, than only what maybe only availability might present in that way of embedding encryption, and how true that is, or if it's just a factor of enforcement made that way. Yeah, well, it happens anyway. But anyway, so like the thing about it is that I was thinking about that because a little bit of humor about the Johnny Bench thing. No drips, no runs, no air. And I was kind of like thinking about the George Bush thing at the time because it seemed to be like the William Jefferson Clinton, Bill Clinton thing about the absolute thing. And now it's like the three diamonds creating a pyramid, triangular thing about the Chevrolet Geo Prism. It's Geo Prison, spelled with a Z, not a S. And the alphabetic's 109 is 110 of governor's president, and all the Los Angeles stuff about the, you know, the Roosevelt New Deal Act and all kinds of stuff about the alphabetics of 6. And as compared to, but anyway, it's kind of like the Johnny Bench thing about the no drips, no runs, and no errors. It's kind of like the no drips and proper English chimerical composition, and the R and a P just be silent. You know, when it's visible, it's like silent like a P is, and even with the R, it's like interchangeable and integrating that way. And it's like the R and a P is like silent. It's like no dice, or like in Orion performance monitoring of like even the issue that in my mind involved would be like the hotmail, the hotspot and networking of Orion performance monitoring of their node, designating what a hotspot is based upon the traffic going through it as compared to like a hub. A hub can dissipate it and reroute it, I mean, inside of it before it even leaves it, but a node in software can't do that. I mean, what's going through it is going to go through with it and not be switched and routed internally like an integrated, like microchip, a central processing unit of integration. Notice just like everything's going through it. I mean, if it's in the circuit, it's going to go through it to its next destination and not, you know, dissipate any kind of, you know, thought of like creating the hot in traffic that way. It's called a hotspot, and the node is what has the similarities of a hub and hardware that way. But I was thinking about the Johnny Bench thing about the no drips being like the no dice, the ice node, and what that is too. Like what I'm like thinking about the HTTP : and the hockey stick, and the hockey puck and the Klondike, the Swiss Klondike bar, and you know its shape. I'm thinking pretty much is pretty much the same of a Swiss Klondike bar and a hockey puck, and you know talking about the Orion performance monitoring and the hot air balloons and all that stuff about color codes. And all the things that I've been talking about on my YouTube.com channel at Wade ASV Pretty is kind of like the thought of Mitt Romney and William Jefferson Clinton is kind of like, yeah, I have a Mitsubishi Triton Absolute thing. I'm having a Mitsubishi Triton Absolute thing. It's kind of like the transition between the William Jefferson Clinton presidential terms in office and Mitt Romney and all the stuff that they've said. It seemed that it has the humor of like very much of a circuit involving, you know, NAFTA, North American Free Trade Act, and NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, of what civil rights is that way. Even with NAFTA, and all the way, you know, the Cowboys and Indians thing into the NATO, like UN sanctions and other factors involved that way of a treaties organization that way. But anyway, yeah. So like I think about that because a little bit of the humor of the Johnny Bench seemed to be ultimately the no drips, no runs, no error, and it presents the pronunciation deal of proper English numerical composition when the P is visible, sometimes it's silent, and the only other factor of like the difference between the county and the countries when you see the R is pronounced, when it's not, it's not. But you know, integrating the practical application of principle, you know, and integration that way, and no drips would be the no dice or no ice, the ice node, yeah. And it seems it gets right into the immigration customs enforcement of like nodes and software performance monitoring in the language of HTTP : and the AJAX that I'm talking about right now in Abraham Lincoln Night Vision, what a partition only is to the kernel and terminology of a duration of American history, presenting the plantations and Abraham Lincoln thing about ratifying and codifying involving constitutional law that way, okay? And I kind of like really get into like, you know, analytically thinking about everything I have like studied about it alphanumerically, linguistically, and all that. So I think it's like kind of cool sometimes. I'd rather be than not be, let's put it like that. But anyway, so like I was thinking about that because it seemed to be that the Johnny Bench thing, you know, him being a catcher and the Cincinnati Reds, okay? And my thought about the McDonald's Golden Arches as compared to what maybe would look like a cycle per second, 1 cycle per second of oscillation, but a agreed level of ripple standard of consensual participation above the equator, or what dimensional clause means based upon that. And, you know, like 2 cycles being on top of the line, if you want to call it an axis, a horizontal flat plane of oscillation with both cycles on top, like McDonald's Golden Arches would present, and the one white arch of St. Louis presenting the red cardinal bird. And it's like, I'm trying to actually think about if there's any connectivity of Johnny Bench in his statement, no drips, no runs, no errors. And all the humor about, I can't believe it's butter. And, Austin Powers, Bluebonnet Imperial Eagle that way. And what Bloomberg is, the iceberg, or there's some other birds involved as compared to like Bloomberg and the iceberg. And there's like some other birds, okay? Yeah, but I gotta think about it. Anyway, so like, yeah, and what that is to certain Air Force bases in the immediate area, yeah. So like, in any case, yeah. So like, I was thinking about that because the Abraham Lincoln Night Vision, and it seems to be like, how long is it going on? Because like I noticed, like during the George Bush administration, backtracking how long I noticed that I hadn't seen the additives, preservatives, and byproducts. Was like, the transition from William Jefferson Clinton to George W. Bush. Although W is 23, and my thought automatically is like Fox 29 News in Philadelphia. And what the celebration, 200-year celebration of America is during the Richard Nixon 1976, and, give or take whatever it needs to mean right now of quadrants. And, like on tennis court, okay, George Bush, okay, here's the thing about George Bush in the Dream Theater. Music video, he states that it is the sacrifice sons of the Dream Theater 9/11 thing about it. Yeah, so like he was stating that will not fail, will not falter. And falter is really the thing about the rectangle on the tennis court. And all of a sudden, I mean, it didn't. I immediately noticed that when I heard, and it was, I've seen different versions of the same video of George Bush, but it's kind of like now you see it, now you don't thing. And he was like referring, and even being able to hear him was like only like if it's an intellectual duration of actually being anything other than maybe you might thinking there was a commercial, I think, with George Bush and a bunch of static or something about Read My Lips thing about it, and then it was like another thing of George Bush in Dream Theater Sacrifice Sons music video, and he's stating that it was really hard to hear, and it was really almost some reference to like the TV screen of like Read My Lips thing, that I think he was actually the one involved with it. I think that was George W. Bush as well with the Read My Lips, or it may have been his father. But anyway, yeah, in any case, also like, that was kind of like the deal about the Dream Theater, being able to really hear George Bush. It seemed to be only specific times of what he was actually saying. He was referring to, will not falter. And it seemed to be that the quadrants of the rectangles on the tennis court ultimately has gotten to the, the hood ornament, Lincoln Continental, and the 90 degree of the vertical to the horizontal. And the thing about going through a StarGate program of taking the places that normally did not have like a engraved in granite, or my thought of the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. And, like I mentioned previously before, there was a location that normally wasn't identified with any rectangle or any engraved letters on granite in the form of a horizontal or a wide thing about that. But anyway, it's like during that time, it's kind of like that thing about the word plaza on it ultimately got to the 56 and Papermate, and the drum and quite a bit about the 56 and just the pronunciation of the 25th letter Y, and the question about the spelling HY being 56 likewise in addition. But anyway, so there was a lot of stuff about when I was hearing and when I was watching him, because like I practice Dream Theater as a drummer as a standard preference, just because of the complexity of progressive, yeah. So like I use that and I do that as a standard, but I'm actually trying to get to the point where I'm not dependent upon other people's music as a standard reference. But that's what it's on my YouTube.com channel right now. Wade ASD, pretty a standard reference, and really I'm really beyond more than 3,000 songs. I mean, really simple and easily of like everyone else's music except mine, and I've really been trying to like get into mine and not have to just go back to the thought of like staying safe in some kind of way, just going through the motions, even with twirling my sticks, and I got to get my drum set set up and all that good stuff again, like get into my own original music. But anyway, like I put that on YouTube as a standard reference, just as a portfolio, not limited to an introductory type of thing about what my capabilities and preferences are as far as sound goes. Lyrics would be a different deal, but in any case, yeah. So like anyway, during that Dream Theater Sacrifice Sons, George Bush is talking about will not fail, will not falter. And automatically, you know, everything that had been happening the way it's been happening, being on SSI and all that, and the tennis court being the four quadrants and the four quadrants and globalization as compared to, you know, geometrics of like the spherical quadrants of the football shape of a flat plane, two-dimensional flat plane as compared to, you know, thought of what that is in at a 90 degree would represent like a perpendicular spiral or a pylon or a cone or the Statue of Liberty that way, of a telepathic teepee and Native American Indian that way. Ultimately getting to the North American Free Trade Act and NAFTA, you know, all the way back to the cowboys and Indians, and thought of like, hey, you're getting baptized during the gold rush and on the stagecoach thing, okay? Well, anyway, like gets on into that, because I wanted to include the thing about George Bush because, you know, his middle initial being W in 23, and GMC being 23, and raising the bar, and my thought of solid state is to, you know, the bandwidth and spectrum that way. And the potentiometer, and just a three-letter acronym of IBM being like the 101 thing about the division, the Christian thing about the acronym, the E equal MC squared applied to even the three-letter acronym of IBM. It presents like the solid state, you know, bandwidth and spectrum, and the power up, likewise, in addition, the potentiometer, just based upon alphanumeric computation with like IBM. But anyway, yeah, so like the input-output thing about it as well, yeah, so like yeah, so like thinking about it, and I wanted to include that because it seemed to be the Dr. Pepper with the 23 ingredients, and the 23-year anniversary celebration presents, you know, the 23 twice being 46, and like algebra, or the Buick thing about the Buick century, or, you know, the absolute values going all the way through, you know, algebra through calculus on into quantum, and the thought about the 20 thing of Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs being 2020, or the thought of 23 and 23 and the difference of 6, 20 being, you know, alphanumerically 107, and 3 being 56, okay, and 56 twice is like 112, like Houston is, and quite a bit about what algebra is the whole point of finding the unknown, which is 112 likewise in addition. And the 112 thing applied to, you know, even the area code 213 of telepathic brainwave, Chevrolet Silverado, and the Z71 of Pearland, and all that stuff, and getting to, like, you know, the area code of Los Angeles 213 with that, and equating to some idea of the alphanumerics of that combined, 213, and the 112 and the 101 being, you know, 213 that way, or likewise in addition, you know, the principle of like a governor's president, 109 is 110, and the area code of 213 of Los Angeles, and telepathic brainwaves applied with that 110. It's like the newest deal about the area code there of 323. But anyway, yeah, so like I was thinking about that, I just wanted to include that because it seemed to be like that Dr. Pepper, it presents all that with the George Bush administration, like introducing, you know, the .gov shadow government, like Abraham Lincoln Night Vision, and my thought of, you know, the transition, and even recognize that the Jose Can You See by the Dawn's early light thing about, obviously, you know, the Dawn's early light being like nano units of night vision. Yeah, so like I just wanted to include that because I was thinking about that, and what the tennis court is in that way, and the Y2K that way, and the hockey stick, and likewise the deal about the Y2K and the double forward slash that way of the hockey stick. Because, you know, looking at the double forward slash, it looks like it's automatically like a 22.5 degree, and but I actually looked to see what it's considered as its degree. You know, just holding the hockey stick up with the slap shot, the slapstick side of that, you know, slaps the hockey puck, and standing it up. I mean, just looking at it, it looks like to me it's like real close to the double forward slash of a, you know, HTTP : double forward slash. I actually haven't really. But it just, in my mind, it just seemed to be a 22.5 degree. But anyways, identifies 135 degree. And that divided by like 22.5 is 6. And likewise, it seemed to be the deal about Mr. T, what absentee voting is to the A-team. And Mr. T, a pitiful guy. Yeah, Mr. T thing about Aaron's leasing. And all this about being on SSI and what's being made available. I mean, you know, I don't want to say it's like, you know, making my own mind up in decisions, like, you know, it's really not funny sometimes, just making a decision knowing like, oh, that's like their some idea of like economics. I don't like calling it demographics, but I mean, really, it's not cool sometimes thinking that, you know, just making decisions. I mean, it's already so not funny to me about something like that. But anyway, that seemed to be the deal about the Samsung refrigerator. Likewise, and what 56 is 10 is to the 28.2 cubic feet. it's in my mind, it's really 28.5, and the 56 is 10, the paper made. And the thing about 56 is 10 being about the word annotating Roe v. Wade. That way, simply using two numbers, because simple thing about, when the alphabet is reversed, the M is N, the N is M, 13 is 14, 14 is 13 that way, and the alphanumeric is 55, and heaven and the sky and all that stuff, right? Well, anyway, so like that, with all that in that way, I was kind of like thinking that the Mr. T thing about the Samsung being the alphanumeric of 94. And it's like a dark, I don't know if I'd call it charcoal, a polished type of, it's a dark color, kind of black, kind of charcoal, kind of not really black, but well, when I saw it, like, I immediately wanted it anyway without even thinking about it. But it's like identified as 28.2 cubic feet, and like the pi square would present the 56 is 10, a paper made alphanumerically, and combined with numerical and alphanumerical, and getting the results that even Y2K numerically and alphanumerically present, the alphanumerics of 94 and the 56 is 10 of Y2K, and annotated and Roe v. Wade that way, or the way Roe is spelled with a W. And if it's only the reality of George W. Bush introducing the Abraham Lincoln night vision over, June 14th, 1992. I mean, at this point, the book cover, The Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover up of the CIA's top secret StarGate program, and the author. I'm trying to remember the first name, but I know the last name is like Morehouse. And like mooring and the thought of yachts and huge ships of importing and exporting. What mooring is with all that as compared to something amphibious in a way. Beyond, the front lines of the beachfront, and making it great beyond internet protocol, local area network, and maritime law that way. So like there's like towing and there's towing, and it seems to be the big deal about towing, getting beyond the maritime law thing about what I'm talking about, or the liquidity, what I see maybe as whether or not if it's dormant or insignificant, only because it's not a known fact of how it's used or intended to use, and what's needed and required for it to be an active, effective, participating factor, like I'm thinking the squelch is on a radio, normally involving, cycles per second in frequency. That would max out maybe with a 13-band graphic equalizer with, bandwidth and spectrum that way. And, the way I see, like, authenticity of, like, auditing legal media and deposition that way, of even the United States Supreme Court, that doesn't, change any authenticity of the original. And I'm thinking that the 13-band graphic equalizer is the absolute max that way, as compared to, as far as, I don't like calling that evidence, because, the thing with this is, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to what a patent is, or a patent pending, and what's protected or what's not, or, all that stuff about, terminology. But anyway, so I was thinking about that because it seemed to be something that's significant, like what's going on, and as far as like computer language, and the Ajax thing about the terminology during American history of ATP : and the thing about Ajax and the kernel is predominantly the thing about whether or not if segregation is really the deal, or a partition in a way of computer programming that would be maybe a factor of maybe only what intellectual would mean of having fair use of easements of the ultimately originate the thought of like royalties in a way, or a claim in that way. I mean, managing an entire neighborhood, or an entire state, anything, whether it's on par, above sea level, or on or below par, or surfing the internet, beyond the front lines of the beachfront, and making it way beyond, internet protocol, local area network, and maritime law that way. But anyway, I thought I'd include that because it's already going on like 44 minutes right now, and so I'm going to give it a little bit more thought about the squelch and what that is. I'm automatically thinking it's dormant in a way of what liquid would mean to some idea, not necessarily a consolation, but it's there, and if that's going to be the redundant frequency, the RF of the 24, the Washington Post of like Washington being 130 in television, electronic god of like legal media, as compared to the Post being the memory, the division, the archive of the Post being like the deposition, or whether it's, live on air as compared to maybe the national deficit or available in closed caption for the hearing impaired, or the YouTube thing of, combining it all and apply to the acronym HOA, Homeowners Association, with the pronunciation of WHOOPA and the Toucan Sam thing, and for Purple Mountain's messages above the food plain, and the Ulysses S. Grant America thing about it, right? So anyway, it's already going on 45 minutes. I'm going to take a break right here and get this upload, okay? Talk to you later.